Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Institute of Politics for tonight's Speaker Series event, featuring a panel of 4 elected officials representing Gen Z leadership in public service. My name is Tyler Shasteen. I'm a 4th year in the college studying economics and law, letters, and society. I am from Carterville, Illinois, and here at the IOP I have the privilege of serving on the Student Advisory Board. Tonight's topic is particularly close to my heart. Beyond my academic work, I serve as the elected Republican committeeman for Chicago's 5th Ward. I know firsthand the unique challenges and profound opportunities that come with representing a constituency as a young person in a polarized era. Whether it's managing local election logistics or engaging in civil dialogue across deep ideological divides, Gen Z leadership isn't just a prospect, it is a current reality. Joining us to discuss the ground game of Gen Z politics are 4 remarkable office holders. Illinois State Representative Nabeela Syed, who made headlines by flipping a critical suburban district, has become a leading voice for youth engagement in this state. South Dakota State Senator Amber Hulse is the youngest woman in her chamber, bringing a vital perspective on navigating state-level legislative policy. Wisconsin State Representative Kalan Haywood holds the distinction of being the youngest person ever elected to the Wisconsin State Legislature and serves as Assistant Minority Leader while representing the city of Milwaukee. Mayor Brooke Huckaby of Arabi, Georgia, who made history as the youngest mayor in the state of Georgia and the youngest female mayor in U.S. history. Tonight's conversation will be moderated by our very own Zeenat Rahman, the Executive Director of the Institute of Politics. Before we begin, a few quick notes. Please take a moment now to silence your cell phones. When we move to Q&A, a microphone will be circulated in the audience. We ask that you keep your questions concise. As always, students will be given priority for questions. Please join us for upcoming speakers events, including Democrats at a Crossroads on Thursday, January 15th at International House, and Trump at 1 Year on Tuesday, January 20th on the 1st floor, right here in Ida Noyes Hall. In addition, students are invited to a night at the museum tour of the IOP House and gallery walls on Monday, January 12th at 6 p.m., featuring string musicians and light refreshments. You can find our full schedule at politics.uchicago.edu. Now, please join me in a warm welcome for Representative Syed, Senator Hulse, Representative Haywood, Mayor Huckaby, and Zeenat Rahman.
Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to Winter Quarter. Thank you for joining us today. We're kicking it off with a bang with these amazing people that I have on stage who decided they saw a problem and they decided to do something. And so I'm so excited to be with you all today. Thank you for being in Chicago. For those of you who are not used to the weather, Nabeela is, but others who might not be. I just want to start with your decision point. Like, each one of you had a point where you could have waited and decided, like, I'm going to get more experience and then I'm going to run, but you didn't. You decided to run. And Brooke, you became the youngest female mayor in American history. Kalan, you were 23 when you first ran. Nabeela, you made history in 2022. Amber, you stepped into the role after clerking for Governor Noem. What made each of you think, I'm not going to wait, I'm going to do this right now? Any one of you can start. Would you like to start?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I was actually very young when I decided that I wanted to run for office, and so that's kind of rare to be in 6th, 7th, 8th grade and know that you wanted to run for office. And it was because something happened in my hometown where the federal government, flick of a pen out in Washington, D.C. really frustrated me and something that was happening in my community, and I saw the adults in the room not really doing anything about it. And so from that day forward, I sought to get an education and go off to law school, and then with the intention of coming home and running for office. And I did just that. While I was actually still in law school, I finished my law degree early. They wouldn't let me graduate early, and so I did a couple other tasks and things to keep my student status, but ran for office in my final semester of my third year at Georgetown Law. Back in South Dakota, somehow managed to finagle that and won my election on June 4th, I think it was, and graduated from law school on May 26th. So it was a quick turnaround and a lot happening at the same time, but you can do both.
You always knew you were going to do it and you were going to jump in. Interesting. Nabeela?
Yeah, I think for me, I'd graduated college and I was starting my first full-time job out of college, and I had free time. I was a remote job. I was back home with my parents, and I was talking to my friend over FaceTime, and I just had a desire for better representation. We both did, for better representation for the community that we were born and raised in. And we were looking at candidates that were running that could potentially flip the seat, because I had strong disagreements with our former state representative, and she had suggested, Nabeela, why don't you run for office? And it was a crazy thought at the time. I was just 22. But then we looked at the other primary campaigns happening in the area, and specifically for my district, and we weren't excited. We didn't feel like this was a campaign that we were super thrilled about, that would motivate us to come out and vote enthusiastically. So she kept asking me to run. And a few months later, I launched my campaign in October. We won our primary, and then we went on to win our general.
I was kind of similar to Amber in the aspect of, I knew from a young age I wanted to be involved in politics, but not necessarily on the state level. I've always made it a point to try to be, a big part of my community, and growing up in a very rural agricultural area, coming from a farming background, I really wanted to see those characteristics, stay in the community, but also, which I know y'all have a lot of rural areas around here, if you don't invest consistently in those areas, they sort of seem to disappear. And I saw a lot of my friends, graduating high school, going to college, and not coming back. And I just decided that, I didn't want to make that decision. I wanted to invest in the place that I felt like had invested in me. So that was sort of my draw to want to be in the position I'm in.
And Brooke, you come from a farming family?
I do.
How many generations?
As far as I can count back, 5 or 6.
5 or 6 generations. And how much did that play into this idea of wanting to come back to our home and give back?
Really a lot, because you just don't see people investing in community anymore.
Yeah.
And it's necessary.
Kalan?
Yeah, so it might sound cliche, but I remember being in 4th grade and seeing Barack be sworn in for the first time. I think that was my initial interest in politics. Then I started working on campaigns when I was 13. Met some folks who were running for office. They told me to help out in the campaign. I thought I'd be walking around carrying their clipboard, but they gave me my own clipboard, gave me my lick, gave me a list, and said hit some doors. So got started early, did internships, did community organizing, and then I actually ran at 18. So freshman year of college just got done. My predecessor had been in the seat for 26 years. He called me, said he's thinking about not running. He told me he can wait a session and I can go again next time, because the plan was to run for city council in 2020. But I was like, no, the time is now. So ran in 2018, and my thing was just throughout the years I worked in the community doing campaigns, doing internships. I saw the adults in the room not figuring it out. 2 + 2 is clearly 4. But they would argue about that not being the case. So for me, I saw in my community, I saw issues and I saw things that were happening that affected people that looked like me. And there were no young people at the table. I think that we had some younger folks who were 28, 30, but I was 18 at the time. So although they're younger, they're not as young as I was. So I felt it was important that we be at the table. Then ran for state office. Everybody thought I was kind of crazy for doing it, but it worked out. It's been, yesterday made 7 years since I've been sworn in.
Wow.
So it's been a good run.
You're like an older Gen Z now.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Careful who you call old.
Right. Well, look at it. Look at you guys. Me sitting here, I can call you old. I think politics, the decision to run takes a certain bravado or confidence, but actually governing requires humility. And I would love you to talk about a mistake that you made early on, whether it's in your campaign or when you were in office, and what did it teach you?
I can go. So, like I said, I was 18 years old running for office. I don't come from politicians in my family. I am the first and maybe even the last for a while. We'll see what my kids want to do. But my district is in downtown Milwaukee. Milwaukee has 12 state reps, so I represent the downtown area and a part of the north side. I am a black elected in a majority white district, but at the same time, my black residents need the most help in the district. So campaigning in the district is super diverse, and I realized that early on that one message does not work for the entire district. It's really have to get to know your neighborhoods represent, the people you represent, and see what they want, what they need, and really speak to those issues. So we had one piece of lit in the beginning of the campaign, put it out, used it. It wasn't great at first. Then that lit went south, and some folks did not love the literature we did, and that's when I realized that no, this job will take some creative engagement, make sure we're really connecting with folks and keeping a pulse on what's happening. So I learned that one message does not work for everybody. I think that I've seen that be a thing for now. My races nationally, that you got to work on messaging for sure.
You got to work your messaging. What other lessons did you learn?
Sorry, Amber, did you want to go?
I'll go if you want.
Yeah, please.
I think that I rested on my laurels too much because I thought that, especially as a woman, that my credentials were going to carry me through and that the piece of paper was going to get me everything. And so my first committee hearing in front of the State Affairs Committee, which in South Dakota is the committee that has all the leadership on it, I brought several election law bills because that's the area of law that I work and practice in, and thought that all of the leadership was going to respect me and my knowledge and intelligence about election law because that's what I do is my real job. Not the case. In fact, one of the members of leadership basically killed my bill, and I knew he didn't even read the bill because I turn on the read receipts on email. My colleagues don't know that. And so, so that technology really helps out when you're a younger member. And so he killed my bill without even reading it, and was very upset that I hadn't come and met with him personally to talk about my legislation, even though he was in leadership and didn't really have time for the young freshman legislator that had too big of goals in her pocket of passing several election law bills. And so I guess I learned early on that things that matter to those of us in the room in higher education and things that often matter in places like the University of Chicago or Georgetown don't matter sometimes when you go home, and will not matter to the people that raised you up, and that's really okay too. Because they're the ones working in average, normal, everyday American life. And so that disconnect was a little difficult to try to figure out how I was going to gain respect amongst my colleagues. And funnily enough, actually, the bill that they killed that day, eventually they had to do some procedural mumbo jumbo later on to bring it back from the dead because they realized that they needed it and that I was right. So karma does come back around. But it was a little difficult to go home and somehow had to kind of stand up for myself, even though I had worked for 10 years to go and get the credentials that I thought I needed to run for office, and then essentially have that spit in my face that we don't care that you have a law degree and we don't care that you went to DC and you have 10 years of public policy experience. If you didn't come and meet with me, then your bill's going to die. And so you really have to learn that grassroots and learn how leadership works, and especially being a young person in the room, how to earn your trust despite your background or even your experience. And that was frustrating, but I think it was a good humbling moment and a good learning experience as well.
Also, along the lines of what Amber said, I've found sort of two mistakes that I've made throughout my 3 years in this. The first one being you can't expect your personal relationships to carry over into politics, especially being in local government. You grow up knowing these people for most of your life. They watch you grow up, especially being significantly younger than them. And it's like Amber said, they sort of have this opinion of you, and nothing's going to change that but yourself. So you just can't go into it thinking, oh, well, I've known them for so long, this is all going to work out, because that's just not going to happen. And then the second point is, I feel like a lot of people tend to overpromise when they're campaigning for anything. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. When in reality, you don't realize until you're in the position that your power is limited. You're only one person. You can, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to do this, oh, well, this is my intention, I'm going to try my best to accomplish this. But it's more just representing the people that elected you as best as possible, instead of sort of giving false hope with promises.
I would say for me, it's both on the campaign side and on the government side. a lot of people, I think, came to me with advice. You know, when I launched my campaign, and then also when I got sworn in, a lot of people want to help. And I think the help is very much welcome and appreciated, but sometimes the advice is not always necessary to internalize. So I remember when I was first running, a lot of insinuation about how could someone like me at 22, wearing a hijab, South Asian, flip a Republican held seat in the suburbs. This area has historically never been represented by a Democrat, and how could I have the audacity to run? Maybe I should do this, maybe I should talk like this, maybe I should have these kinds of events, and knowing the importance of trusting my own gut and the advice of people who have been in my corner, who do know me, who do know what I'm capable of, rather than trusting people who are maybe completely well-intentioned, but sometimes don't understand that we can win people over. I remember someone told me, old white men will never vote for you, Nabeela. And I responded and I said, when I knock on doors, I love old white men. Okay, they're wonderful to me. They're so kind. They treat me with so much respect, and they have these conversations, and they'll make generalizations. But then my lived experiences will be different. Or on the governance side, I think a lot of people, there's this rule that like when you're a freshman, don't speak. You need to sit down, you need to wait your turn, and you need to listen. And there are definitely times where it is so important to sit down and listen. Listening is the number one thing I think we all do. But there's also an importance of doing the work. You were elected to do the work. You were elected to represent your constituents, and reminding yourself that you have a right to be there just as much as any of your colleagues, and you have a right to do your job and do it effectively. So it was appreciated to hear that advice of, sit down and wait your turn, but it was also necessary for me to realize that, no, I came here to do work, and I will do my work respectfully while listening, and also still make sure I'm advocating for my constituents.
I think there's probably a lot of common cause between what all of you said about what motivated you to run for office at a young age, and then listen to constituents and things like that as you're getting elected. But I'm sure a question in the audience is like, so then what happens to them when you actually get to the governance part? Like, what does it take to take something that's an idea or a problem that you see and move it from like a bill, or move it into a law, or move it into something that becomes actual policy? Like, we have a bunch of policy nerds in this audience. Would love any of you to take that up, whoever would like to answer that.
I'll start and talk about South Dakota a little bit. So we're only in legislative session for 38 days, and we give every bill a hearing, and we have this many legislative staff. So you're looking at the chief of staff, the communications director, the one who writes the policies, the one who answers every single constituent email, everything. And so, and that's even in the upper chamber as a senator. And so when I carry property tax legislation, or when I carry an election law bill, I essentially go to our legislative research staff, which are essentially, the only staff that we have, and they're bipartisan, and, just do the drafting. And I say, this is the bill that I want. You can give them the draft language if you have the ability to write that, if you have a background in law or policy, and you can say, this is kind of what I want it to look like. They'll put it in the format of whatever the, law needs to be, or in the code, in the section of law that it needs to go into, and then you run it. So you show up to the committee hearing and you give your spiel about why you want that bill to be a law, and then your colleague on the House side does the same thing. You speak to it on the floor, and then it becomes a law. And so it's scarily fast in some ways. It's a huge responsibility, I would say, but it's also really incredible. So if you're somebody who's interested in going to Washington, D.C. and working on policy, also really incredible and really impactful because it's your entire nation, but also takes a really long time. And so if you're like me and you want to see progress and you want to see movement and really get things done, state level and local level politics are where you can see that happen. And in states like mine, it happens in less than 30 days sometimes.
It's incredible that it's that quick.
Yeah. I passed a bill my first year that bans price gouging of off-patent and generic drugs. And this bill was introduced maybe 5 years ago. I think maybe introduced a few times after that, but didn't make much headway in previous sessions. So when I took that on, I remember I went to the speaker and I talked to him about this bill, and I let him know that this was going to be one of my top priorities. And he said, good luck. Prescription drug legislation is very, very tough. And that's understandable, right? Like, a lot of prescription drug legislation should be coming from the federal government. We have seen a lot of inaction on that. And it's unfortunate because my constituents and constituents across the state are very much struggling. People across the country are struggling with prescription drug affordability. So when I brought forward that bill, it seemed like a long shot initially, and it was tough, but I think becoming an expert on that legislation, knowing that bill in and out, because I will say a lot of we have 118 members in the Illinois General Assembly. And everyone's focused on their own efforts, and session is sometimes, it feels so crammed. We're only down in Springfield so often. So there's only limited time where you could have interface with your colleagues and also with advocates and also people that are opposing your bill to push it across the finish line. So it was important for me to make sure that when I was communicating with my colleagues, I knew the ins and outs of this bill so that I could convince them that they should vote for it, despite all the opposition. So that bill gave me a little bit of trauma my first year, I will say that. But eventually we did pass that bill, and I'm very excited that that is now law in the state of Illinois.
And so Amber had said earlier, that a very sound kind of piece of legislation just didn't pass because she didn't do the trust building or the relationship building. Did you find that to be true as well?
I think, yeah, the relationship building was imperative, but we were also facing significant opposition. I think when a bill is complicated in nature and legislators are expected to be policy generalists, when someone opposing the bill comes to a legislator, a lobbyist comes to a legislator and tells them, these are the reasons why it's going to do this and it's going to increase costs. It's tough to figure out who to believe. Do you believe your colleague who's researched this bill and obviously wants to pass it, or do you believe this lobbyist who's telling you this information? And then sometimes when an issue is so complex, what I find is people kind of want to give up. You don't want to dig in and figure it out on your own, but I think that was why it was so important for me to become knowledgeable about it so my colleagues could trust me. And it was also my job to make sure I was imparting the truth upon my colleagues. I didn't want to mislead them about this bill. I want to be honest with them about what this bill would do and potential consequences and why we needed to pass it. And I think that relationship building was critical, but then also having to counteract some of that, the other information that they might have been receiving from a more biased source.
Kalan, do you have one? And then Mayor, I'll come back to you.
So I got in 2018, and Democrats in both the House and the Assembly and the Senate were in deep minority. And I knew that before I signed up for the job. And I think that a lot of times folks use the partisan breakdowns of our chambers as an excuse to not get work done. But I knew that when I signed up. I remember being a freshman, I was 19, we had a caucus retreat before the session started where we were just game planning for the session, and we were doing small breakout groups. And one of the questions on the table was, what does a successful 2-year term look like? And I said, I want to get one bill passed before we got a session this cycle. Because we're in for the entire 2 years. We do the budget the first 6 months of the 2-year term, take the break up for the summer, come back in the fall, finish off in the spring. But I still want to get one bill passed. And one of my senior colleagues looked at me and was like, oh, that's cute, Kalan. That's not going to happen. And you should focus on being in the district and just being visible and going to events. And I'm like, my district didn't hire me as an event goer just to be visible. They hired me to come do work. So that session, I was able to get not just one bill passed, but it was some crazy number of bills. It was upward of 20. But that was because we were able to work across the aisle. My thing is, if we get in the room and talk about 100 different ideas, we might disagree on 98 of those things, but we can find those 2 we agree on. Let's get those out the way first, and then we can fight about 98 later. So my thing was just getting to know the Republicans in the chamber. We're on our way back to a majority now, but that wasn't the case or the reality 7 years ago. But I think a lot of the issues we have in my district in Milwaukee are issues we face in both urban and rural Wisconsin. So being able to travel to their districts, get to know their constituents and what they're facing, being able to find similarities, what's happening in my district, and inviting them to Milwaukee, and getting to see the city and get to learn my city and what created me and helped pour it into me. So finding similarities and then just figure out how we get it done together. We're not gonna get what we want. I think it also helped having a Democratic governor, provided some balance at the time too. But then they just getting in the room, talking about the things, having the hard conversations, being open-minded. I'm a Democrat, I'm the assistant leader, but my thing is I'm not here to play politics. I'm here to get work done. So just again, getting in the room, finding similarities of both in urban and rural Wisconsin, Democratic and Republican districts, and figuring out how we both can get a win for the people we represent.
Brooke, do you have a story you want to share? I can ask another question. Yeah.
I don't have too much experience in policy or writing, especially not as much as they do. But I'm more, I guess, Parks and Rec focused, and department establishing is in my job description. So I guess in the last year and a half, we actually started a police department, which amazingly didn't cost the city hardly any money. We have a very great local option sales tax in the county that we live in, and it made us able to pretty much fund the entire thing from the ground up without having to pay too much out of our budget. And there was a lot of backlash when we brought up the idea of doing it, because my city is actually one of the few cities in the state of Georgia that is not in any debt. So we don't owe any monies to anybody. And we also do not have any property taxes. So a main concern with us establishing this police department was, oh, well, we're gonna have taxes. Taxes are gonna go up. So just sort of like what you said, just assuring people, you know, being fully transparent, like here's what we got, this is what's funding it. And people tend to react well to the truth, or at least they respect it.
Yeah, and I would say authenticity, just listening to the four of you speak. And talking about the thread of commonality between you all is that you're Gen Z legislators and lawmakers. And there's a lot of talk about what makes Gen Z different, right? Like you're digital natives, you're more diverse as a cohort, you are less trusting of institutions. And I want to ask you, from where you sit, do you think that Gen Z elected officials do you think that they bring something different to governance that feels meaningfully different from previous generations or from, you know, others that are not of your generation that are legislating?
Yeah, I would say that what I feel, and I would talk more so about like Gen Z Democrats. I'm more familiar with more legislators that are Gen Z that are Democrats, and I would say that a common thread I see between us is like the willingness to criticize and the willingness to call out hypocrisy. You know, one thing that really upsets me in the state of Illinois is we are a Democratic majority state, and the fact that I think we're 8th in terms of most regressive taxes in the nation. And to me, that is appalling. The fact that the working class is suffering at the brunt of decisions that Democrats are making in our state as well. But I think it's critical that as a Democrat, as someone who is elected in the Democratic Party, I can be critical. I'm plenty critical of the Republican Party. You know, that is there, but I can also be critical of my own party and call out the hypocrisy when I see it, when there's legislation that needs to be passed regarding prescription drug affordability and Big Pharma is putting up a big fight against it. You know, I've once sat in a room with 40 pharma lobbyists, and they're saying these arguments and convincing my Democratic colleagues of them, but then also calling that out and saying, who are we actually responding to? Who are we trying to work for when we're fighting for prescription drug affordability? And when these arguments are being made to continue to line pharma executive pockets versus make drugs more affordable for people who are making life-saving decisions for themselves, you know, who are we actually responding to? So I feel like Gen Z is a little bit more, can I swear?
Yes.
No bullshit, like a little bit, at least Gen Z Democrats, like a little bit no bullshit, because we know we don't have time to waste. The affordability crisis is here. Climate change is here. People are dying from gun violence. Like these are not things that might happen in the future. They are happening now. So I think we have grown up in this environment. We understand this sense of urgency, and also have felt like people in the room, like the adults in the room, have failed us for some time. So we want to take action on it and understand the urgency behind that action. So I think that might be something that separates some members of Gen Z from other generations.
So being direct, less bullshit, calling out hypocrisy, do you guys agree, disagree? What else would you add to that?
I mean, it doesn't just happen on the left. I think it's interesting.
I can only speak for the left.
I think it's interesting sitting here with all of you. I mean, we're from very different places, very different, I guess, spectrums on the political ideology, but you know, I listen to you and I agree with you on a lot of things as well, and not even just on what you're saying about being a Gen Z lawmaker, but also some of the things you're talking about with affordability and making sure that people have access to their medications and things. That's what I deal with in rural South Dakota too. And so I think that's one thing that Gen Z lawmakers, at least the ones that I've met, even within the Republican Party, where you have people that are more Republican moderates all the way to, you know, more far right Republicans, is that as Gen Z lawmakers, at least the ones I've met, they're a lot more open and willing to look past some of these labels and dividers and really just try to get the job done. And I truly believe in that Ronald Reagan quote, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And it's so true because we're growing up and living in this system that we've inherited from our parents, from our grandparents, and it's broken. Whether you're, and I guess maybe we disagree on the way to fix the brokenness, right? But we all agree that it's broken. We all agree that we're the ones that are going to be around for the next 50, 60, 70 years having to live under it. And if we don't fix it, we're the ones that are going to suffer from that. And so I think, at least for me, something that Gen Z lawmakers bring to the table that I've noticed is that we are more effective. Similarly, I passed, I think, 20-something bills my first year as a freshman legislator, which was unheard of. And I was still attacked as a young person sitting, be quiet, don't do anything, but was able to kind of move underneath that and work with my colleagues who didn't understand me, didn't know what I was about, or really get why I was even there in the room, and yet was still more effective. And many of my colleagues that I know across the nation in different groups that we talk to each other in different message chats and stuff, we're always talking about ways that we are more effective because we don't really care about all the other nonsense. We really just want to get the job done and make sure that the world's a better place for us and our future families, because we're going to be here.
Yeah. Would you two add anything to that?
I think that something that we have the ability to do is agree to disagree and realize, like they said, that we can have diversity without division. And, Abraham Lincoln said close to 200 years ago, and I'm paraphrasing, but a house divided amongst itself cannot stand. But yet our country, I feel like, is at a state where it's extremely divided. And I believe that our generation has the ability to walk into the room and say, okay, hey, I may not agree with you on everything, but here are the main things that we both agree are issues, so let's come to a common resolution to solve it and make it. We all want the American dream. We all want lower taxes. We all want safer neighborhoods. So just having that maturity about us that for some reason the older generation seems to lack is agreeing with each other that we can solve a problem together and not have the exact same mindset.
And just to add to that, I think that Gen Z elected the ability to break the mold, the determination to defy the status quo and to take the risk. Like the fact that we even run when we do speaks to that. And I think that the old way of wait your turn and start in the middle and work your way up to the corner office, I think that's dead. And I think that the Gen Zs are taking risks and they're willing to try new things. We all agree that the system is broken. But we also all agree that what we're doing now is not working. So we're willing to take that risk and try these new creative, bold ideas, but just whether you're on the Republican side of the aisle, Democratic side of the aisle, we're willing to break the mold, defy the status quo, and take a risk.
So like polarization is something that is like always talked about in national discourse, right? And national political discourse. And Brooke, I think you kind of intimated around it right now that, do you think that polarization is like less, more, or the same within your generation? Like what you all described was like, we want to just get stuff done and, and find common ground. But are you the exceptions, or do you find that widespread amongst your generation?
I think it's prevalent still. I think we still have people who are in Gen Z. Even when we have like Youth in Government Day in the Capitol, we see young people who are 8, 10, 12-year-olds come into the Capitol and they learn about the process, they create policy, they elect a speaker, they have a floor process, pass bills, get it signed by their governor. You see that when they're fighting for issues, you clearly can see which side of the aisle they are aligning with at the moment, whether they realize it or not. But I think for Gen Z folks, I think we have those folks who are strong D or strong R. But I think we are the exception that the majority of Gen Z is, let's get something done. And we're willing to get in that room and have that hard conversation. Some of my closest friends are Republicans. And we don't agree on policy all the time, but we're able to get in the room and have that conversation, have that dialogue. And we keep that door open. I think that's just the difference thing for us. We're able to keep the door open, and I might not like you on the floor today, but we can grab a drink later and talk about it. So, yeah.
So it sounds like we have something to learn as a society from the way that you are approaching your work. And so what does healthy disagreement look like? I think you kind of described that, but what can we learn from how you navigate that, those challenges, those bridges?
I don't have my phone on me because I left it behind the stage, but I was going to hold up my phone and say these things are the problem.
Yeah, right. We talked about that.
Because when you have to work with people and you have to actually govern and get the job done, you can't play games like you do behind the screen or on a message board. And all of that, you know, if you've watched, The Social Network, or some of these, you know, movies that are now being made about, you know, the business behind social media, it's there to divide us. And I think that when you even look in the comments section of probably any of our elected officials pages, there's going to be people saying just egregious things to each other that may not even be what the post is about, and it's dividing us, or at least giving the appearance of division when you're on the internet and spending so much time on your phones, because that's how they make money, to keep the eyeballs there, to keep the disagreements. But when you're actually doing the job of governing, hey, some of my Democratic colleagues, there's only 3 of them in my chamber, but some days I need their vote. I need their vote. And one of my most controversial pieces of legislation was about property taxes, and the governor got involved and killed it, but it passed the Senate 35-0. And it could have been one of the most record-changing things that we did last legislative session if it would have passed through the House. But you know, I remember giving a pretty impassioned speech. Right before I gave my speech, the minority leader came up to me and he said, you know, Amber, I'm not going to vote on your bill. I just can't vote on the bill. He works in real estate in one of the more democratic areas of the state, and he was like, you know, I think it'll help my constituents, but you know, I don't really know if this is going to work, blah, blah, blah. And I gave this really impassioned speech, and he voted yes. And afterwards he came up to me and he said, you know, that was a good speech, kid. And you never know when you're going to agree with someone. And I think because we have to work with these people, and it's the same at the federal level too. You know, our elected officials at the federal level, they'll go on Fox News and MSNBC and they'll say whatever they want about their colleagues, but they're back in their offices meeting with each other, trying to whip votes, and every vote matters at the end of the day. And so I guess, you know, if we really looked behind closed doors and saw what it's like to actually govern, you know, I guess the American people maybe would feel better about the fact that they're working together. But then at the same time, I also hear people say, well, why are you talking to that Democrat over there? You know, why are you talking to them? And that shouldn't be the discourse in the room, because at the end of the day, if it helps the policy get passed that's going to help you and help your community, it shouldn't matter who voted for it or who didn't, because it got across the finish line, and that's what we really need to happen.
And I'll just butt in real quick too, sorry. I think the other thing we got to do is we got to see people as people. I think we see people as the letter behind their name. I think that's what allows you to have friends across the aisle. We are going to disagree on policy, but you are still a human being at the end of the day. I think having that realization allows you to build those relationships across the aisle and get stuff done. Just want to add that.
I think it goes to Amber's point about the phones, right? That's what dehumanizes people from seeing.
I do want to add, and it goes to your previous question that you asked Kalan as well about like Gen Z and whether or not people feel as polarized among our generation. Like an anecdote that I have to share is we have a youth advisory council, high school students, they're the lower end of Gen Z, so it feels like there's a whole generation between us, even if we're in the same one. And one approached me recently and was like, Nabeela, you know, I would be remiss as an Illinois state representative not to mention how ICE has been terrorizing our communities here, specifically in the Chicagoland area, in the suburbs where I live, taking US citizens from their home and detaining them, taking people that are on their way to immigration court and detaining them. And this student came up to me, and we're seeing this in our communities, it's happening in Palatine, and was like, I was having a discussion with my classmate, but they don't believe in Article 5 of the Constitution, where people have a right to due process, regardless of their citizenship status. So I do think, as lawmakers, it is imperative for us to be above the noise, to operate on a set of facts. You know, the Constitution is there, to at least accept those set of facts, because I think we all are and Gen Z is very impressionable to, you know, to social media. And I won't even just limit that to Gen Z.
No, I was going to say that.
You know, I see my dad scrolling on TikTok. Yeah. Okay, I'll expose him. There's so much misinformation out there, so much clickbait out there, headlines that are meant to polarize us. And I think we get away from the fact that that we need to see our neighbors as human. Mm-hmm. And we need to do things in order to protect the people. So it's a little frustrating, because it's nice to say, you know, we got to get in the same room and we got to hash it out and we got to talk about it, but it becomes increasingly difficult for us to do that as lawmakers, but then also as the average person, as a student, as someone who's Gen Z, when people are operating from a completely different booklet of facts. And I don't know what the solution is. I don't know what the solution is to that, but I think it's critical and it's imperative that lawmakers hold themselves to higher standards of seeking out those facts, of adhering to a set of rules and decorum to make sure that we're not dehumanizing anyone, we're not ostracizing people, but we're trying to figure out solutions for our shared communities.
Thank you for that. So I have one more question for them, and then I'm going to turn to your questions in the audience, and we'll have somebody who's running the mic, and you'll raise your hand, so we'll do that in a few minutes. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you all, there are a lot of young people in the audience who are interested in public service, but they might feel blocked by, like, I don't have money, my family doesn't know how to do this, by age, by not fitting a traditional pattern. What advice would you give to your fellow Gen Zers who are considering public service but just don't know where to start?
I don't come from a political family. My dad was drafted into the Vietnam War and my mom's a cook. They ran a hunting ranch. I'm the first person in my entire family to get a 4-year degree, let alone a law degree. I started with $0 in my campaign account and raised almost $100,000, which is like unheard of in a state legislative race in South Dakota, because people were excited about a young person getting involved, and most of those donations were $50, $100 donations from people that live in my community. So you can do it. You're gonna have people that tell you that you need to do X, Y, and Z or the other thing, or give you advice to do something differently than how you're gonna do it. But as long as you have the dream in your heart and the passion and the right people around you, and I think the right why. Don't run for office just because you want the power. Don't run for office just because you think that you could do it better. Do it because you really truly believe that you can be a good public servant and make a difference. And I think the people that you see at our age that are successful, it's because they have kind of a reason why they're doing it, and that's their North Star that keeps you going, because it is difficult, because people are going to attack you. And I got one of the newspaper articles I always like to share. It said, Amber Hulse needs to have children and raise a family and learn how to manage a home before she should be a leader. And that was something for me as a very traditional conservative female Christian, to have that be what my community was telling me, that I was only valuable as a leader if I did those things. And so it comes from both sides, right? But truly, no matter what somebody can say about you, you can be successful and be effective as a lawmaker if you have that dream in your heart. I know it sounds really cheeseball, but it is true. If you really want to do it and you have that dream, you all are very intelligent human beings, and I'm sure can create a really great campaign strategy to go home and be effective.
Know your why. Who else?
I would say, intention really matters, like going into it with the right intention of genuinely wanting to serve your community. And I think when you're rooted in that kind of intention, it makes you excited to go out and knock on doors and meet people and hear what their concerns are. It makes it exciting when you're standing outside the polling station handing out cards and greeting people, because you have a genuine desire to understand their concerns and do something about it. And I think also trusting yourself. I think we all probably heard so much when we were running, just as Amber said it just now too, attack ads, the opinions of others. But I think at the end of the day, when you're rooted in those right intentions and those noble intentions, then that could carry you forward. When people are telling you do this or do that or sit down and wait your turn, I think knowing in your heart that you're doing this for the right reasons and because you genuinely care and you have compassion and kindness in your heart, I think that takes you very, very far. So also a little cheesy, but I think it's honest.
Cheesy's good. We all need cheesy. Brooke?
And you kind of have to have the right intentions with it, because it's not just like a job that you clock in and you clock out and you go home. I mean, it is a lifestyle, and depending on your term length, 2 years, 4 years, you never get away from it. So you really have to care about it going into it and throughout your entire term, just because some days it'll make you want to quit. You have got to grow really thick skin really quickly. And but it's also important, I feel like, that we have those hard conversations and that we even get some of the criticism, because like Amber said, you don't want to go in there in a cocky sort of way. You want to be humble and let people know that I respect the way that you ran the past, but I want to focus on how we are going to run the future. And just, you are the only person. I guess you're going to doubt yourself more than anybody else ever will. And you really just have to learn to tune out all of the negative comments because you're going to get them. I've heard Icetown so many times from people all over social media, right? Like that movie Icetown. I guess I've never seen it, but just kind of swallow it. And also, like I said, the hardest part of it all is keeping your mouth shut, because you're going to get on social media, you're going to see people's negative comments, and again, it shows a type of maturity that others don't have when you can sit there and read something negative about yourself and not go, oh, I'm going to get them, like comment right back. So just believe in yourself and you will go as far as you want to.
So I'll say one, don't wait. People will tell you that you are too young to do whatever it is, run for office, apply for a certain job in an office, work on the campaign side, but do not wait. I had people who in my entire life told me that you're gonna be mayor in Milwaukee one day and you can do it and that can happen. We're looking forward to it. Those very same people, when I announced I was running for state rep, invited me out to breakfast, invited me out to coffee, trying to convince me not to run or pull my name back because it was someone else's turn. Mm-hmm. It is your turn. My slogan was "The time is now." So don't wait. You are not too young. If you are not in that room, in that space, your voice is missing. So make sure that's not a hurdle. I think too, like we said before, you gotta have a why. Like people see these jobs and they think they're super dope, but they don't pay great. You
all have full-time jobs, right?
The hours are crazy. I never clock out. It's a 24/7 thing. I go be getting groceries and I'm in the store now for 3 hours because we're talking about whatever the latest concern is. But having that why, when you have worked a 80-hour week and then Saturday morning at 7:30 in the morning, someone is spamming your Facebook or Instagram, calling you every name in the book, saying you're the most horrible human they've ever met, your why is what keeps you grounded and gets you back to going there. So finding that why, I think we all say this, why you're running. Even when I get to those points where I am beat down, I am tired, realizing that I'm not doing what I'm doing for me, I'm doing this for the people I represent, I'm doing this for the next young black boy with a dream to make a difference. That gets me back up in the day, that recharges my battery. And then 3, I think we talk about in Milwaukee, we talk about food deserts a lot and how that hurts people. My city had a hope desert. So you gotta create a vision that instills hope. Give people a vision they can buy into and be a part of that. So you might be out, your opponent might out fundraise you, might have more name ID. I ran against a congresswoman's son who was elected at the time. More name ID, more money, but build a team, build a vision, and just work your butt off. When the election is over that next morning, win or lose, you will be okay if you can tell yourself that you did everything you could have did. Now, if you lose that race by 2 votes and you know you could have did an extra hour doors the day before election, you're gonna beat yourself up every day about not doing an extra hour doors. So don't wait, find that why, and create that vision that instills hope in people and you'll be all right.
Thank you. I won't ask another question, but I did want to ask about imposter syndrome, so if you can incorporate that into any responses for the questions these all have. How do you overcome it? And I think that's something that, just keep it in your brain if there's an opportunity. Now, students get priority, and we have people running mics, and so I will, go ahead. If you can introduce your name, your major, and stand up, please. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Luca Proper-Bowering, and I'm a 3rd year at the college studying public policy. As Gen Z lawmakers, I'm sure you have tons and tons of people trying to perch themselves on your shoulders and tell you what you should be doing, exactly what you shouldn't be doing, and I'm sure lots of these people are, your seniors and are very well credentialed. How do you differentiate between well-intentioned advice and just kind of noise and fluff from those people? Thank you.
Good question. Yeah.
Well, you have to have good discernment, and I think when we talk about your why, you also have to look at who that person is and the place that they're coming from too. And so I was taught this a long time ago, not in the context of politics, but you should never take advice from somebody that you want, or that you don't want to ever be in their position. Like if you don't want to be like that person, you probably shouldn't take advice from them. And so, personal anecdote, somebody told me that I needed to be more like a good South Dakota farm wife in order to be respected more. because I had done beauty pageants and was in the pageant world prior to doing politics, and so it was kind of in the context of needing to like clean up my social media, which was really odd because it was all like community service and public service and stuff. Were there a few like things from competition swimsuit things and stuff? Sure, there was, but that didn't mean that I couldn't be an effective lawmaker. And so I knew that that piece of advice was coming from someone who just was uncomfortable by the fact that I had done those things. And you know, he didn't want to hire me for the job that I was applying for, but you know what? I got a better job after that with a much better law firm. And so it's kind of funny when you look back at those moments because you're really hard on yourself and you do say like, okay, well, am I ever going to get hired again? That could have been my only job that I could have ever, you know, gotten in South Dakota, and I kind of spit in his face over that comment. But it all works out in the end. But you really have to have your own core set of belief systems and have some kind of true north that you're going to follow, so that you have the discernment and the ability to really navigate that.
If somebody else wants to answer, or we can move on. So if you have a pressing need.
I would say just talk to the people. Like, they elected you for a reason. They trust your judgment, especially after you do a re-election a couple times. But trust your gut. And I think you learn something from everybody, whether that's good advice or bad advice. Everybody has lived experience, but at the end of the day, talk to the people you represent about what you're trying to do. Trust them and trust yourself as well.
Thank you. Okay, who's next?
Hi, my name is Kalan Ryle. I'm a fifth-year PhD student studying genetics. So this panel is kind of all about how we think Gen Z might do something different compared to, you know, the older generations and kind of what we would consider the establishment. How do you guys foresee yourselves preventing yourselves from getting kind of jaded and soul-crushed in the brutal world of politics if you were to continue, and, you know, stop yourself from just kind of falling in line, going with the rhythm? How can we hope that Generation Omicron, whatever, 20 years from now, isn't having this exact same panel talking about how Gen Z is now, or with Gen Z now the establishment, and they want to do something different?
I think a big part is just knowing your identity and where and what you find your identity in, and really staying rooted to that. And I mean, for me, you know, I'm a Christian, so I truly pray about everything that I do, every decision I make, even as far as future positions go. I don't want to go anywhere that I feel like is not the Lord's will for my life. So I guess my identity is just rooted in knowing that I'm going to follow His will no matter what it is or where it is.
I think having like hard lines for yourself is very important too, like a line that you will never cross. Knowing when something is pulling you in a direction that you're gonna have to compromise your own morals or vote a certain way that just makes you so uncomfortable, and taking a stand against that. But I think it's honestly questions like those. Like I feel like as a younger lawmaker, I get asked that a lot. Like, how will you not become part of the system? How will you stay independent? And I think it's continuing to have engagement with not just my constituents, but with individuals like yourself that are continually putting that seed in my mind of like, you're right, we can't get complacent. We can't be, you know, just nodding our head yes and being okay with the status quo or going along to get along. But I will say, when I knock on doors, like, that is what people appreciate hearing too. They appreciate hearing that you're willing to think on your own, that you're willing to take a stand when necessary. And it's not me like purposely, you know, trying to differentiate myself. It's me communicating honestly. But I think like the more that you hold yourself accountable by having more interface with your own constituents, it forces you to continue to make those decisions when you're down in Springfield or your state capital, to adhere to your values and to the promises that you made, because you know when you're going back home and you're knocking on doors again, you don't want to disappoint those people by being dishonest or going along to get along.
Next question.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm Hannah. I'm a first year. I'm not sure what I'm studying yet. And my question is, like, the pragmatism and empathy with which you all seem to approach leadership is really kind of inspiring and moving. But I'm wondering, like, how you are going to continue to convey that, how you're going to work to help your peers move in that direction as well, and whether you think that can be replicated on a national scale. Thank you.
I was just going to say, actually, the answer to the last question of how to not have this panel 20 years from now is all of you in the room joining us to not just have 4 or 1 in a body that's of our generation. I mean, we're the ones taking the reins. We're inheriting the system. I mean, even some of my friends in Washington, D.C. that are working in the administration now, it's the 20-something, 30-somethings that are running the free world. And so you have to realize that you're going to be inheriting some very large responsibilities very soon, and it's up to all of us, it's up to our generation to make sure that we're not sitting here with our kids 20 years from now having the same conversations about how we continue to allow the system to be broken. And so, you know, you talk about empathy and pragmatism. As long as our generation continues to be the ones that stand up and say, no, we're not doing this anymore, this is not okay, and our generation is going to stop it, whether it's, you know, you're on the left side of the aisle or on the right side of the aisle, everyone is not okay with the system that we're operating within. And our generation, for whatever reason, seems to have a fire lit within us. And I hope that we're the ones that change this, and so that we don't have to worry about, you know, whether the 4 of us are going to be strong enough to carry the torch. It's up to all of us. And so I hope to see many of you walk away from this being inspired to get involved in your own way, all the way from, you know, being an alderman in the city council, all the way up to potentially maybe there's a president in the room here.
And I would say that it's not just limited to our generation, right? Like also seeking out people in other generations. Like right now, you know, the one part of the job is running for office, the other part is governance. But when you're running for office, there are other state representatives that are running right now for office that have never held political office before, are amazing candidates that are willing to disrupt the status quo for the betterment of our communities. And I believe part of my job is also supporting them to make sure that I have colleagues that can come along with me and have genuine, you know, this genuine desire to create change and actually make our communities more affordable, more accessible for people. So I think part of that is, you know, bringing all of you along, but also when we have people running for office, you know, I believe part of my responsibility is to make sure that I'm also surrounding myself with people who have that same kind of mentality and that same kind of compassion. And I keep saying this, aren't just going along to get along.
Hi, I'm Vera. I'm a 4th year. This has been great. Super excited to have you guys. I'm curious, for those of you who knew that you wanted to run early on, when you were actually deciding to run, how you knew what seat you were going to run for.
Good question.
My family's ranch is in the area that I ran from. It's where I grew up my whole life. It's all I ever knew. Oddly enough, I was a White House intern about 3 years before I was going to run for office. And when I was a White House intern, there were some issues in the office that I worked in about contacting the current senator, and there were other things that were happening. She was censured by the legislature. And so I very much felt like it was maybe I was made for such a time as this moment, that the exact time that I was going to be going home, graduating from law school, that the current state senator had been censured. And so we really needed some fresh blood in there. And the guy that was going to be the incumbent in the House that was going to try to run against her again, who had failed before, I called him and said, you don't know who I am, but, you know, essentially I would like to run for this spot. Or I said, what do you think about, you know, what's going on here? And he was like, yeah, I would really like your advice on how I'm going to beat her. And I said, well, you know, sir, I really appreciate that, but you're not going to run against her, and I am. And I laid out the whole plan. And so now he's actually my colleague on the House side, and we work together a lot. But it's definitely difficult, because there are people that when you go home from college that are going to say there's someone else in that spot that we've been prepping for that are in the pipeline, or it's their turn, not your turn. And it took a little bit of finagling to make sure that everybody was okay with me running, but it's possible.
Yeah, like I said before, I intended on running for city council in 2020. I ran for state rep in 2018. So I think a lot of it is God's timing. I think politics, and I think when you think about folks who win certain seats, it's based on God's timing. You might have a plan about what you want to do or where you might want to be, but God will tell you what that's going to be. So when you win or lose elections, trust it was a part of the plan. I have a colleague of mine who ran for state rep the session before I did, and he lost. He ran for city council the session before he ran for state rep. Lost in the spring for city council, won state rep in the fall, and is now running for governor 10 years later. So trust timing and everything like that. But also ask questions. Call, if you can, call electeds into the room. When I ran for state rep, I had a matter of days to decide when my predecessor called me and told me he wasn't running again. I called every elected official I knew, state level, federal, city, county, that were willing to meet with me, called them in, I asked them every question, even the dumb questions. Like, well, I asked them everything. So just do the homework, do the research, but then at the end of the day, wherever you end up, trust that it is God's timing and that's where you're supposed to be. And just do your best at it.
Let's take our next question.
Hello, my name is Spencer Miller. I'm a second year economics and neuroscience. You've been talking about, yay, Gen Z, we can do it. But what would you say makes you the most worried about Gen Z? In other words, what is Gen Z the worst at relative to the older generation? Like, what do we need to fix among ourselves the most from your perspective?
I would say media consumption. I think, once again, I'm not going to say this is exclusive to Gen Z, but I think the amount of information and misinformation that is out there, we're operating on a different set of facts. It is causing so much chaos in our country because we are not in agreement, because we saw a 30-second TikTok video that, completely convinced us of this alternate reality. I think we are dealing with, different Discord channels and things like these echo chambers where people are seeking friendship and solidarity, and it's completely altering their personality and inciting, thoughts in them that they might have never ever had that are very extreme. I think we're seeing this rise of technology and AI and deepfakes and all these things that, we don't, I would like to think I'm young and I could discern between right and wrong, but the truth is, the way that this technology is being developed, we really can't. So I think this is one of the biggest issues of our life, of our time right now, and how we deal with it, how we regulate it, not just for the sake of, of protecting future generations and all generations, but then for the sake of our environment. I think we are having a lot of big conversations around the advancement of technology that are so necessary, and I think that is one of the biggest issues that is facing our generation.
I think a Gen Z problem and also just a people problem. We gotta do better at staying consistent. The fight is a continuous thing, it's a marathon. We get engaged during election cycles when candidates announce they're gonna run, when we're 6 months out from election. Everybody's involved, everybody's knocking on doors, but the job does not stop when the candidate gets elected. We need you to hold that elected official accountable and also be a part of that team. So I think as a whole for Gen Z, we gotta do a better job at the same energy we bring, the same passion we bring every day to advocating what we believe in, make it a 24/7 thing. We don't stop at election day, we keep going. So I think staying consistent and staying in the fight after the election day is one thing we gotta do better at.
Brooke, do you have thoughts on that one?
No, they summed it up pretty well.
I was just going to say, I think because we're so aware of how much information is out there, I think oftentimes we're a little bit afraid to speak up because we think that, well, if I don't know everything on this topic, I'm not the expert on this topic, I'm not going to say something. But I think we've all in the room watched an elected official who's much older than us talk very confidently on something that they don't really obviously know a lot about. I think I can name a few just in the last week's news. And so I think, being willing to be humbled to know that no one's going to know everything, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And there are so many times where I think the best moments of being a leader is sitting in a committee hearing and saying, I know nothing about this topic, X person, please come up and tell me more about whatever we're voting on right now. And it's okay to admit in those moments, because that's some of the best public policy making I've ever seen happen, is to be okay with not knowing and not feeling like you're not good enough to be in the position that you're in because you don't know enough. And when will ever really be enough? And I think that kind of speaks to the
thank you for answering my
imposter syndrome thing. Like,
question.
no matter, no degree, no class, no anything you ever do in your life is ever going to give you enough to feel like you're truly confident enough. And stop letting the people that are the cocky, just full of themselves people who think they know everything ending up in these positions, because I think that's when we do end up having elected officials that continue the cycle that we're in right now, where we don't feel like they're very effective or not getting anything done. And so I hope that that is at least something our generation continues to step up to the plate without having this imposter syndrome thing, because we're a little bit more self-aware, I think.
So, and last question.
Hi, my name is Ava. I'm studying political science, economics, and math in the college, and I have this question for you. You guys are all really great examples of how Gen Z has been able to break out of some of the bad habits that previous political figures have created in the past, but what is one piece of good advice you've gotten from someone of one of these previous generations, something you want to keep with you as you continue your careers?
Good question.
So when I got in, I was 19, and there was a state senator we had, he was 91. So it was a big thing, 1991, they're backwards. And a bunch of knowledge, he had been around for obviously some time, and he served for 60 plus years. But one thing Senator Richard told me the day I got sworn in, just finished an interview, and he said, Kalan, this job is hard, you're not gonna win every day, but at the end of the day, the next day the sun will come up again, a new chance to try again. So I think that a lot of time when things are going bad, we think that it's the end of the world and it's all gonna stop right now. In reality, it's not. So just know that the sun will come up again the next day and you get another 24 hours to try again and go hard. So there will be a tomorrow. Just give yourself that grace.
That is good advice.
I have one about policy making. There was a state legislator who actually sadly passed away unexpectedly, and he was a lawyer at a law firm that I had worked at, and so I really looked up to him as someone, because in South Dakota you have to have a real job on the side too, so there's not very many lawyer lawmakers, which is rare actually, comparatively to the rest of the nation. But he always said when you're looking at a piece of legislation to ask yourself, what does this bill serve to actually, what's the problem? Does the bill actually solve the problem? And is the bill actually necessary to solve that problem? Because there's a lot of times where people try to push more laws to be on the books and they're not really necessary. It might be something that needs to be done in administrative code, or the bill itself is not actually seeking to serve the problem that exists. It's just like trying to put a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. And so when I am trying to discern whether or not I'm voting on a piece of legislation one way or another, there might be something that I agree there's a huge problem, but this specific piece of legislation might not be the solution that we're actually needing to fix said problem.
It's not necessarily a piece of advice, but just during my campaign and after I won my election, I received a lot of support from, senators, House of Representative members, other local government leaders. So I don't want to sit up here and, just bash our older generation, because obviously they've done something right for almost 250 years. They've kept us going to this point. So it's like I said before, we can respect the work that they've done and the efforts that they've put into, but also see how we can go about it differently. So it's just all about respecting the past while focusing on the future.
Something that really helped me regarding prioritization was, you're pulled in so many different directions, both on the campaign side and on the official capacity. And I think one of my colleagues, he would be upset if I called him old, so just a little older than me. But he said, some of these things that you're dealing with, whether it's your campaign or a specific bill, no one is going to care about it as much as you do. Right? So if you really care about it and you really want to win this seat, or you really want to make this change and enact this policy, you really, really have to work on it and do it yourself and do it the way that you want it to be done. Because a lot of my colleagues are pulled in different directions. We're not, not everyone cares about one issue as much as I might care about the specific issue. So it's my job to prioritize it and work on it and make sure that other people care about it. And no one, especially when you're running for office, right? You will be the one that cares the most that's on your campaign, and what's going on, who's knocking on doors, how's your campaign being presented. So it's important to be very, very involved in this, in that work, and know it. I think there's a tendency to want to delegate sometimes, but if you really want something done, sometimes doing it yourself is the way to go. So that was helpful advice that I received my first year.
I want to thank each of you for your service, for your commitment to public service. Yes, thank you. And I also want to say to all of you, if you're inspired by their commitment and the path that they've taken, IOP is actually going to launch a leadership program, and the deadline for that program is January 14th. And it is geared towards freshmen and sophomores, first and second years, and really talking about skills, how to cultivate skills in public service. So go to our website, find out more, and again, please join me in thanking these incredible individuals for being with us today.